2 weeks ago, I got to fly out to LA to play Redfall early. Today, I get to share my impressions with you guys. A couple things before we get into this. This is B-roll footage. They did not allow us to capture our own gameplay, so you're watching a dev, I assume, play through this, not me. This is a pre-release version of the game, meaning you're gonna see some jittering and some bugs. Mainly the frame rate is not exactly smooth here. I've been lucky enough to go to enough events where this is normal, this is common, this is what games look like when you play them early, so just keep that in mind. So what is Redfall? After playing this game for about 2 hours, it is a first-person open-world shooter like Far Cry. I think that is the best comparison. Bethesda and Arcane made that comparison themselves, and I think it's the most accurate. It does have some light looter shooter elements, but don't go in thinking you're gonna grind for very specific gear sets. This is not a Destiny, this is not a Borderlands, for example. This game is supposed to be playable entirely solo, but co-op if you want to, and we've seen games do this before. I think the best example of a game that can pull it off is Borderlands. You could play that game by yourself or with a group, and it was fun either way. During this event, I only got to play solo, so I don't know what it feels like to play with other people, but as a solo experience, it plays just fine. So the general overview of Redfall is you're stuck on an island, and it's being controlled by these very powerful vampires, which the locals call vampire gods. You've got cultists that actually worship these things, and then the vampires themselves. Those are both of the enemies that you're going to be fighting. The vampires have raised the tides around Redfall, so nobody can leave by boat, for example, and they've blocked out the sun, so it's a pretty serious deal. Our play session starts a couple of hours into the game, and I decided to play as Devinder, who, funny enough, is an influencer. He comes to Redfall to kind of investigate and discover what's going on with the vampires, and of course, he gets stuck there. This mission, we're going after one of the vampire gods named the Hollow Man. It turns out this guy is a former doctor that was in Redfall who decided to do some experiments to turn himself into the Hollow Man. And apparently, he is responsible for starting this vampire apocalypse. So in order to stop it, or at least try to figure it out, we have to go to his mansion, which is this really spooky, dark, haunted sort of set piece, and kind of piece together, okay, what's going on, what happened, how can we fix this? So that involved wandering around this mansion, finding these dolls, and then placing them into a dollhouse. In classic Arcane fashion, that transported us to an alternate universe or plane of existence. It felt very Dishonored in that way. In this psychic plane, you discover that he's been experimenting on this little girl named Amelia, and yeah, he's a bad dude, but anyways, you end up getting the lab key, and that's sort of, the whole mission. You're trying to get the lab key to discover, what was specifically going on in Redfall. What was this guy doing? And that's pretty much all in terms of specifics that I got out of the story. I will say it's kind of hard to digest, slow down, and really get a feel for a story at these events. But that's okay, because now we can talk about gameplay. So the section that I played, completely open. Now we do go to the set piece in the mansion, but yeah, I basically traveled across the map of Redfall in order to get to this location. And I actually traveled a decent way across the map. I don't know if this is the entire map, but it felt like a good chunk of it. And Redfall is not that big. And I'm saying that as a positive. I did not want this huge sprawling map, in Redfall, and that's really not what you're getting here. It is a very self-contained map. Think more like the size of Deathloop. Or maybe if you were to stitch together all the levels from some of the Dishonored games and say this is one level, that is what Redfall feels like. In the map, you're gonna run into roaming vampires or groups of cultists that are kind of standing around, and like other Arcane games, these NPCs, at least the humans, they felt kind of dumb. And the reason they feel dumb is because it's an Arcane game and they want you to experiment. So they're kind of standing around next to very conspicuous places where you can easily set off traps, blow them up, or just headshot them. That is something to note with the different enemy types. So like I said before, there are human cultists that worship the vampires as gods. And so these guys are humans, which means you can one-shot headshot them. So don't go into this game expecting some really bullet spongy enemies outside of the vampires themselves, because the humans are just human. You can go around, headshot them, especially like you're seeing some stealth gameplay right now. If you have a silenced pistol, go for those headshots, just like any other arcane game. And then you have the vampires themselves, which I felt had a really unique way to kill them. So there's 3 specific ways that we were told you could kill vampires. Number 1 is with a stake. So you've got normal guns in Redfall. Most of the guns are just, they shoot bullets, right? But in order to finish off a vampire, you have to stake them in the heart, which makes perfect sense. So that means closing the gap and meleeing these guys to finish them off. However, you can also burn them to death. So there's a couple weapons like the flare gun, for example, is something you could shoot at a vampire, they will burn, and that will kill them for good. Your third option is UV light. Now there are some UV light guns. I don't think I have any gameplay of a UV light gun, but Devinder's ultimate is a UV light. He just pretty much like plants a stake in the ground and it freezes any vampire within the range. And then once you've frozen a vampire, it's kind of like a Gorgon. They turn to stone and then you just have to melee them to finish them off. So I don't know, it adds a different layer and it's very like context appropriate, right? Like vampires, you need to stake them in the heart. You need to burn them. You need to UV light them. It makes sense. And I sort of appreciated that about this game. It wasn't just, you know, let's make these enemies more bullet spongy because they're powerful. No, they're vampires. You need to kill them in vampire ways. So the open world in Redfall has some very open worldy type stuff going on. And what I mean by that is there's safe houses. So there are specific areas that are overrun by vampires. They're marked on your map. If you go to that place, kill all the vampires, then you will have unlocked that safe house. You'll get some vendors and stuff. It'll become a place you can fast travel to. Pretty much what you expect from an open world video game. There's also these areas of red mist that will appear, and they basically just kill you. If you're in the red mist, you're gonna die. And from the other creators I talked to there, I don't think anyone really knew how to get rid of it, although they did tell us UV light would do it. I tried that and it didn't do anything. So there's going to be a way to get rid of this red mist. But yeah, I'm thinking like a lot of arcane games, the way you're going to get the most out of this video game is by slowing down and sort of seeing how many options you have to do every single thing, because that's what arcane's about, right? They want to give you as many options as possible to infiltrate, complete an objective, to kill, whatever it's going to be. So the best example of this is Devinder has what's called a translocation device. So he throws this thing out and then wherever it lands, you can teleport to that or teleport back to where you came from. This was really useful for me to just kind of like skip sections of fights. Like I could just translocate myself above people into a window and then, you know, complete the objective instead of having to fight all the way through them. Now, Devinder's other ability is this electric stake thing that he can throw, and then you can impale enemies, or you can just put it down in an area and it'll sort of shock them, give you an opening to get an easy kill. Now, Redfall has a lot of the classic weapons that you expect. You've got SMGs, ARs, shotguns, pistols, and then it has some funky stuff like the UV light beam. Again, I don't think there's gameplay of this, but you can literally use this to freeze vampires in place and then just melee them to take them out, and it felt really powerful. And then you have something called the stake launcher, which, man, this thing was hard to use, but whenever you pulled it off, it felt satisfying. It kind of felt like the Spartan laser in Halo, where it takes forever to kind of load up, but when you finally pull it off, it feels amazing. This will instantly kill a vampire, just like if you were to stake them through the heart. So that is an option as well. Oh, and then I forgot to mention there are snipers as well. So you've got that as an option, and sniping felt really good. Now let's transition into more of the RPG stuff in this game. Now there's skill trees. You're going to be leveling up in this game, gaining experience. There's different tiers of rarity of weapons that you're going to have with different skill rolls on them. So there is going to be a bit of like itemization going on that you're going to have to worry about. But again, nothing like so deep that you're going to have to look up what you want to do, you know? So it feels like they tried to strike a happy medium of, okay, this is actually accessible. This is something that, you know, your cousin can pick up and play versus something that you're going to need to like do research and look up YouTube videos to find out what to do. With Devinder, I picked a couple of skills that like increase my health, increase the damage of my javelin, electric javelin ability. I also think I enhanced my translocation device to like teleport me quicker or something like that. I played around with as many weapon types as I could, and my preferences were definitely shotguns and snipers. I just like a more powerful gun, but of course you kind of need your bread and butter, so I always went with an assault rifle, you know, in order to make sure I could actually compete in fights if I was missing my shots. Speaking of gear, there is one section of the game that I got to play after the story was done, and that's kind of the open world clear the neighborhoods thing. So you're like, you know, gathering these safe houses and clearing different parts of Redfall in order to take it back from the vampires. In the process of this, you go into these vampire hollows, which are these doors that appear, and then you get transported into a randomly generated dungeon, which sounds awesome. Maybe sounds like the coolest part of this game to me. You're in these twisted sort of versions of reality where vampires pop up, and you sort of move through the dungeon until you find a big vampire heart at the end. And then once you destroy that, you have like a minute to go around and try to find some loot before the vampire door vanishes and you've completed the task. And as you do these, really any actions in the open world, it's going to increase this meter on your screen, which is going to say that the vampires are hunting you. And that's going to send this big bad enemy called the Rook after you. Now, I didn't get to fight the Rook in my session, but I talked to another guy who did fight him and said it was like an intense battle, really cool. They ended up killing him and getting a legendary weapon out of it. So that sounds like it'll be a fun, satisfying game. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is all of the different classes. There's 4 different characters, so I'm just going to kind of run through these because I didn't play as anyone else but Defender. Jacob is sort of this sniper guy, so he's got stealth abilities, he's got a raven that can spot enemies, he also has a cloak that makes him invisible, and so it's basically like your Mordecai, your hunter Borderlands character. Remy is a combat engineer, so she's got a little robot so she can send this out, distract enemies that attacks them. She's also got C4, so she blows up people, and she can heal around her. That's her ultimate ability. And then Layla is the one with sort of these bright purple attacks. So she's got telekinetic powers, think Borderlands. So she can create an elevator that sends her up, and you can use this with her teammates as well, which is really cool. She's got an umbrella that shields her and soaks up bullets, which she can fire back at enemies. And then her ultimate is she summons a vampire ex-boyfriend to fight on her behalf, which sounds hilarious. If I were to go back, Defender was fun. I liked the translocation device, but I'd probably go as Jacob. I know it sounds very like bread and butter, but at the same time, I really do like those sniper abilities. I like being able to tag people around me. That just sounds more like my playstyle. So that was my overall experience on Redfall. I had fun. I could see the potential with this game, and it's definitely something I'm going to play when it comes out in May. The thing is, I went in expecting to enjoy it, and I ended up enjoying it. So it does feel like if you like arcane games, if you like this style of game, then I think you're going to be satisfied. But if I were to take an above the treetops look at this game and kind of see where do I think it's going to land with most people, I think that if you like this type of game, you're going to like it. But if you already didn't like it, then I don't think Redfall's doing anything different enough to sort of change your mind, if that makes sense. This is very much an open world, sort of clear the map, and you can play with your friends type of game. And I think there's totally a place for games like that. Just something you can throw on with your friends and have a good time playing for a couple of hours every night. I don't know what the replay value is going to be on this thing, but I don't need it to be like Borderlands where you play through the game and then boot it up again and keep playing and playing and playing and grinding for the best loot. As with every video game, if you adjust your expectations to what you're seeing and what people like me are telling you, I think you're going to have a good time. I think it's easy to look at this, have the wrong idea, go in and get disappointed. Make sure you know what kind of game Redfall is, and I think you'll enjoy it. So that is it for me, guys, on Redfall. I hope this preview was helpful. I hope it gave you some good information, and I hope that my experience, gave you a good idea of what kind of game Redfall is going to be. Once again, thank you to Bethesda for flying me out and letting me play this game. It was a really cool experience. I met some awesome creators and awesome Bethesda people too, and I don't get to do this often. Every time I do, it feels really, really cool. Like, I just feel really fortunate. So I hate to get sappy on this video, but yeah, just reminded me how fortunate I am, and thank you guys for being here, for being the audience that allows me to do stuff like that. It's really cool. That is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Hit that bell to receive notifications every time I upload. And of course, look out for Redfall gameplay when this game comes out on May 2nd. Thank you guys so much for watching again, and I will talk to you on the next one.